What's going on, everybody? It's Eli here from TreeFall Studios. If you're new to this channel, I am a full-time indie game developer and I sell my games on PlayStation and Steam. Today I am bringing a brand new tutorial series on the Unity game engine. This series will include a set of short 5 to 10 minute videos aimed at complete beginners, someone who has never touched anything in game development before. And by the end of it, we're going to be making a functioning micro game in just the Unity engine. There are a lot of good Unity tutorials out there. However, most of them kind of just show bits and pieces into random things that you can do with the engine, and it's kind of hard to build a complete game from there. So what I'm going to be focusing on in my tutorial series is building blocks, basic things that you can take and expand upon in order to make your own game. Alright, so let's get started.
Alrighty guys, so you're going to want to jump over to your web browser where you're going to be starting at the very beginning, and you're going to want to type in Unity 3D. Alright, so take the first link, go to Unity's website. It's actually pretty simple. It used to be harder to find Unity Hub, but now if you just click on Download Unity and click on Download for Windows, you can start right here, Download Unity Hub. So choose Windows or Mac, whichever you're using, and then from there you will choose your Unity version. So let's go ahead and jump into Unity Hub. Once you get Unity Hub open, you want to navigate to your Installs tab on the left. At the top right, you can click on Install Editor. You will get these options, the latest lifetime stable version for 2021 and 2020. You can also see one for 2022, which doesn't have a stable version yet. You can see the releases that haven't come out, and more importantly, you can go to your archive and click on Download Archive. So that's what you're going to want to do for this video. That'll pop you up to a web page right here where you can see all of the previous Unity versions. You can scroll down and highlight any one that you want and download it. For this tutorial, we're going to be making our project in Unity 2021.3.17. So you want to click on the Unity Hub here, and you can open it up in Unity Hub to install the engine. Alright, so once you have the Unity installed, you want to go to your Projects tab and you want to click on New Project. Then you want to click on 3D Core. We're going to be using the basic Unity template for our game build. Over here, you want to just select a location to save it, and for the project name, we are going to call this TreeFall Tutorial Game. After you do all of that, you want to go ahead and click Create Project. It won't let me do it because I've already made this section of the tutorial. So you want to go ahead and Create Project, and then we'll jump into the game. After a good bit of loading, your Unity engine should pop up and look something like this. Alright, so everything we're going to be going over today in this part 1 of this tutorial series is basically just getting the engine set up and showing you how I like to use it. And then from there, we will be learning programming and the different aspects of the Unity engine. So you can see we have a scene view, we have a hidden tab that says Game, a tab that says Asset Store, we have the inspector on the right, we have the project and console on the bottom, the hierarchy up here on the left, and then you can see we have our account information and all of the tabs up at the top. So I'm going to show you how I like to set up my Unity engine, and then you can see for yourself if you would like to do the same thing. So the first thing is the hierarchy. This is basically a list of all of the objects that you have currently in your loaded Unity scene. In the default scene, you can see we have our main camera here and we have a directional light. If you click on anything in the hierarchy, you will get the information and properties of that object over in the inspector tab. I typically leave my inspector over here on the right. However, I kind of move my hierarchy down here at the bottom, and then I slim it up about like this so I can basically just read what I've got going on. So you can see that widened our scene view a ton. If you're going to be doing some level design, you might want to have a giant scene view like this. However, I typically scoot my game window over like this in different stages of development in order to basically be able to see what it looks like as I'm working. And then from the game window, we can do a couple setup things here. You can set it on game, display 1. Instead of free aspect, we're going to go down and change it to 1080, which is 1920 by 1080. This is HD, so you can now see what your game would look like from your rendering camera on a 1080 screen, which is basically what we need for consoles. As you can see, it's a little tight here. We're going to change these. So when we want to play the game and you want to play it full screen and not on this little bitty screen, we want to change this to say play maximized. So that's going to help us out. Right here, we're going to go ahead and click on this. This is muting our audio. So when we play the game, it won't be playing any music. For right now, we're not going to have any music, so it's not really going to matter. But for the sake of this tutorial, when we do put music in the game and sound effects, you don't need to be hearing it coming out twice. So we're going to just go ahead and click that, and then we're going to slide this guy back. And then for the asset store, they automatically tab you this for some reason, but I don't think we don't really need this for this tutorial. We're going to be doing everything from scratch, so you can go ahead and close that tab to make a little bit more space. So I think we're going to go ahead, now that this is the setup that I like to use, my project window here, my hierarchy here, the game, the scene, and the inspector. We're going to go ahead and move the game window back, and we're going to tab it under this so we can see a full scene window just for the sake of this tutorial, because for right now we're not going to have a whole lot going on in the game window. Alrighty, so now once you've moved your game tab back, we have a couple more setup items to take care of before we start talking about the scene view. So a lot of people think that Unity is very bloated now, and in some respects they might be right. If you're wanting to make an efficient and large scale game in the future, you're going to want to get rid of all the bloat that you no longer need to get your game running. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Window, and then we're going to scroll down to the tab that says Package Manager. As you can see, it's going to pop up a new window. I like to dock my package manager right behind the inspector, so it's over here on the right side. And as you can see, if you look down in the project tab, we have our assets here. So we have our scenes folder that was automatically created with our sample scene, and that's it. There's nothing else here. And if you look below, you can see we have a ton of packages that come default, even in the blank 3D core setup. Now, these packages actually increase the size of the Unity project file itself, and we can shave off a couple hundred megabytes of our blank project right at the start by getting rid of some of these. So we're not going to need all of these, so if you want to scoot your inspector tab over just a little bit so we can see the package manager a little bit better, you can see what comes pre-installed in Unity. You have something called the JetBrains Writer Editor, and it says this is for providing integration for using JetBrains Writer as your code editor. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to be using Visual Studio, so there's absolutely no reason to keep this in your game. You want to go down to this little tab at the very bottom, click Remove, and say yes. And it's going to go load for a little bit, and then it's going to remove that, and then it'll reload all the packages. There's a few more that we can get rid of. The timeline is not something that we're going to be working on in this game. This will be something that you will want to keep in your games if you're going to be doing cinematic camera shots, going from basically pre-rendered cutscenes into gameplay again. That's something that you could look at in the future. But for this test project, we're not going to be using this, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. It's going to compile, reload everything, and then also there's a couple other things that we can get rid of. For this project, we are not going to be using Collaborate from Unity or Plastic SCM for our version control, so we're going to go ahead and remove this one as well. And another thing that we can remove is the Visual Scripting tab. We are going to be using Visual Studio, and I'm going to be going over basic programming lessons that anybody can understand, and it's going to give you the building blocks on how to put together a game. But we don't actually need to use any kind of visual scripting that Unity provides now, so we're going to be doing everything by hand coding, so we can go ahead and remove this as well. So the ones that are remaining, this is basically up to you. We don't really need to use TextMesh Pro for just this test tutorial game, but I'm going to leave it in here because you would want to use this package if you are making a full game. This test framework basically allows you to play to edit the game and then play it in the engine without making a build, so we want to leave that. We want to leave the Unity UI in there because we're going to pull up some UI elements. These plugins allow you to use Visual Studio as your code editor. So now that we've cleaned up our project, our packages, and cleaned up our project a bit, you can just go ahead and click Close Tab. All right, another thing to mention, if you ever lose a tab, there's a couple ways to add it again. If you want to dock it in a certain window, like this inspector window, you can right click and you can go here, Add Tab, and there's a few tabs that they will let you pop up. However, you can see that not every tab is available, so to get that, you need to go back over to Window, and basically all of these are different tabs that you can open up, and they're split into different categories, and all of these can be docked in any of these windows. You can dock them, like if you wanted to open up lighting, for instance, you can go to Rendering and Lighting, and this will be important later. I usually dock my lighting tab over in this right side of the inspector, but if you wanted to, I mean, you can stick it over here and put it in the bottom. You can stick it over here and put it on the top of the scene view so you can see it in full screen. However, I think it's just a little bit inefficient to do all of that, and if we're going to be editing any type of settings or gameplay properties, I put it over in my inspector tab. So you can go ahead and leave your lighting here. We'll open that up later. So now we have the basic Unity engine setup. Now, the one thing that I would like to say is the hierarchy is kind of just, just a list. It's just sitting down here and you basically have a list of objects. And when you make a large game, it's kind of hard to keep track of everything because sometimes you can get lost on where you've put things depending on how you created them and how they went into the hierarchy. So another piece of setup is we're going to click on Game Object. We're going to click on Create Empty. We're going to click up here in the Inspector tab. We're going to rename this to Scene Setup. I like to use basically the equal sign. You can use dashes here. You can use whatever you would like. You just want to use a couple dashes, like let's go like that many, and then type in Scene Setup, and then we will continue using some more dashes. Now what we want to do is we want to zero this out. You want to click on here, click on 0, 0, 0 as you tab over. Or let's put this random location. You don't have to type it in. You can also click on the settings here and click on reset, and it will automatically drop you to the origin of the scene. So we want to just keep it at 0, 0, 0. All this other stuff is fine. And then as you can see here, we're going to drag it up and we're going to place it right here. So if you're looking at your hierarchy, you can see that this is not going to look like any other game object. And then what we want to do is we want to duplicate this. We want to rename it. So you can do that from down here in your hierarchy, or you can click on it and rename it up at the top in the inspector. And then we're going to call this Scene Objects. So basically these are just separator tabs, and you can make as many of these as you want. So for our major things like code that's going to be running through our whole scene, our cameras, the character, all of that kind of stuff, as I put under the tab of Scene Setup. However, our walls, our enemies, our coins, our doors, all those kind of objects, I'm going to list under Scene Objects. So this is just a little bit of setup here to get you going ahead and being organized before we get started with our project. And the last thing I'm going to be going over in this beginner tutorial, now that we've talked about the inspector window, the hierarchy window, the project window a little bit, you can see that this is just housing all of our assets for our game. We talked about setting up our game window and getting rid of all the packages we don't need. I'm going to briefly go over the scene view and how this works before we set up our game. And in next week's video, we're going to be setting up our game from scratch in the scene view. So for the scene view, you have a ton of tools over here. You got buttons up here, you got buttons up here, you got tools on the left, and you got your gizmo over here. And if you can see, when you click here, you see I'm looking around. To do this, you want to hold down the right mouse button. When you hold down the right mouse button, you get a little eye icon. As you move your mouse around, you can now look around the scene. If you would like to move around the scene, you want to get closer to our camera, you can use the WASD keys on your keyboard, and you can press them in any direction while holding down the right mouse button to fly around the scene. If you want to look and move at the same time, that can be done. You can move the mouse and you can press up and down on the keys to fly all around. However, you might realize, oh, I'm kind of lost where I'm at in my scene view. So what you want to do, let's say you want to get back to your camera, you click on the camera, you click into the scene view, and if you press the F key, it will go to focus on that object and it will automatically warp you back to where you need to be. That's a good hotkey tab to keep in mind, especially when we're going to be working a lot in the scene view. Another thing about the scene view is there's all these grid lines and different gizmos that will be appearing. You can change this by clicking over here. You can toggle all the gizmos off. You can see that the camera has one, our light has one, and the different objects we're going to be making in the next video have one. If you click on this drop down arrow, you get a giant list of all of the Unity gizmos, and basically we can turn off ones that we don't want or leave them all on, or turn them all off. You can also fade them out, or you can change their size. So, you can make them huge in case you really need to find where something is. I kind of like to shrink them just a tad so they're kind of out of the way when we're looking at our overall level design. So you click this little drop down arrow and then we can get back out of it. Over here are our basic move tools. I was showing you what you would do with your mouse clicks. However, you can go ahead and move around here, and these are your different object tools. So let's create a game object to go ahead and start our scene so you know what I'm talking about. You click on game object, we're going to scroll down to 3D object, and we're going to click on cube. This is a perfect example because it dropped the object to where we were looking, which is over here. So we're going to want to go ahead and zero this out. I personally like to just type in 0 3 times instead of hitting reset. I think it's a little therapeutic, so I do that. So now our cube is in the middle of the scene, and this is what we're going to turn into our floor. As you can see, I clicked on a couple of these things, and you have these rotator gizmos here, and you can rotate the cube up and down. So you can do that visually with these tools on the left. This is the scale tool. We can scale it in any direction this way. This is the rect tool, and then this is the transform tool, which combines all of them together. The only major things you're going to be needing, and this is the view tool, so this can slide your view around. However, I think it's more efficient just to use the mouse and fly around like that. The main tools you're going to be using is your regular gizmo move tool, your rotate, and your scale. However, you don't have to actually scale or use the tools visually. You can do all of that from the inspector. So over here, we're going to just change these values all back to 1, so we have our cube. And then, like I said, this is going to be the ground of our level. So what we're going to do is we're going to scale this by 10 for now. We're going to scale the Y by 10, and then the Z by 10. You can see now we just have a giant cube. Doesn't really look like a floor. So you want to go make sure your Y factor is actually 1. So now we want to move our camera to where we can see the floor. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do that. Like I said earlier, we can just type in directly here and move it up and down. We can actually click over the Y and we can slide this left and right to go up and down. We can use this gizmo to go up and down. But there's also another hotkey that we can use to make this a little bit better. So we're going to reset this back to 1. If you hold down the control key and you press on any of the gizmos here, you will now snap to your grid size. So you can see we can set an exact value. Right now the grid size for me is scaling at 0.25, but it will probably be defaulting to 1 for you. So we're going to scale this up to about 3.25. So you can type in 3.25 here, or you can pull it up here so we can see the game. Alright, another thing is if we press the play button now, we will jump over into our maximize play view, and you can see we have some ground here and the camera is looking at the ground. So that is going to do it for today's tutorial. We just basically talked about how to download Unity, how to set up a new project in the Unity Hub, how to name your projects, what version you should get, and then we talked about all of the different core features that I use in Unity to set up the game. We talked about cleaning up the package manager, we talked about each window individually, and now we're going to be focusing on actually building a game from scratch next week. So this video is very, very beginner level. It's exactly aimed for those of you who have never touched Unity before and don't know any of the terms and don't know where anything is. So this is how this series is going to progress. I hope you enjoyed this first episode and you learned something from it. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and leave me a comment below letting me know if you like the pace, if it's a little too slow for you, or if you would like a more advanced course in the future. Before we go, I got to give a personal shout out to everybody who supports TreeFall Studios on Patreon.com. I got to give a personal shout out to Carmen Red, Overhyped Gamer, and Shark and Minnow. Thanks for what you do for TreeFall Studios on Patreon.com. If you're interested in supporting this channel, helping me make games and make more videos like this, you can check out our links below. We have our Patreon below, as well as all of our games that you can go and purchase on PlayStation or Steam. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will catch you in the next one where we will be setting up our first micro adventure game.